Hello, what is going on, Pi and Gaming community? Rami here from Out of My Mind Arcade, and I am going to do a quick getting started video tutorial on my RoboMatrix 500GB pi4 attract mode image. And just give you a kind of rough idea of what you're going to get upon first boot. As you can see, I am in Emulation Station, and this is what you will first boot into when you boot up the image. And it's so that you can configure your controls the same as you do in Emulation Station with any other Emulation Station image. You'll boot it up, you will configure your controls so that it sets it for all of the emulators. Same thing with this, even though attract mode is the main front end I'm using with this image, you will still boot into Emulation Station upon first boot so you can configure your controls. Okay, so once you have done that, scroll through your menu and find RetroPie settings, options, configurations, whatever you want to call it. Oh, and then you're going to go down to front end selector. This, just hit OK. The first thing that you guys are going to want to do is choose this option, copy Emulation Station controller layout to attract mode. This is so you have controls when you first boot into attract mode, because the front end controls, as you will see soon in the video, that it is completely different from Emulation Station. We'll get into that once we get there, but go ahead and select that, and then once it does its thing, you go down to the third option and boot to attract mode. Alright, we're going to let it boot, or it's going to reboot rather. Alright everyone, now that you have done that and rebooted and that you have gone through the intro, this is where you should be as far as attract mode goes. So now that you're here, one of the first things that I recommend you doing, and you don't have to, you can play around with it for however long you want, and you don't even actually have to do this, but I would recommend reconfiguring your controls for the front end. Now, unlike Emulation Station, once you configure your controls, you're pretty much stuck with what you have as far as the things you can do control-wise in the front end. That's not the case with attract mode. You have a ton of different controller inputs for the front end itself, and you can set however many you want, however many buttons you have. You can set one for every button. You can actually set multiple inputs for a single button. Now we're not going to dive into all of that. I just want to keep this pretty basic just to kind of give you a rough idea of how it works, because again, it is completely different from Emulation Station. But on your controller, you're going to want to hit start, and you should be prompted with your configuration menu. And from there, you're going to want to scroll up to controls. Alrighty, now that you're here, go all the way to the top. You're back, up, down, left, right, and select. You should not have to mess with any of those. Those should be exactly how they need to be. Now, as far as the rest of your controls go, I'm just going to kind of quickly scroll down so you can see what I do have set up on mine and what I don't, but yours probably won't look as bland as mine, meaning you probably have a lot more inputs highlighted and set on yours, and that's because of you copying your Emulation Station controller layout to attract mode. Now, again, you can leave it how it is, but some of the buttons, especially if you've never used this front end, some of the different buttons that will be set up might be a little confusing. For example, the filters menu. There's already so many categorized sections in attract mode. I really don't see the need for the filters menu. So I've completely removed my filters menu inputs altogether. And even though I think I have like 8 or 9 different inputs set, they're all pretty basic inputs. All right, so I am going to show you how to remove and or switch an input. All right, so okay, we are on toggle mute, and that's because for this front end you have a mute button. Of course, that's very simple and self-explanatory. Set mute button, hit the mute button, it mutes all the audio. And now again, these controls are only for the front end. So if you hit the mute button and mute all the sounds for the front end, when you launch a game, you will have sound in everything else once you leave the front end to go to launch the game. The game itself and everything like that is that it won't mute any of those sounds. So yeah, so that only works for the front end. But I'm going to go ahead and show you how to remove, set, or completely remove, however you want to do it. And I'm going to show you how to do this. Sorry, I don't mean to sound mumbly, but okay, so anyways, what I mean by remove joy input is these buttons right here. That joy meaning joypad. I don't recommend removing any of the keyboard inputs. Let's just jump over to, actually go back up and you'll see exactly what I mean. So back, as you can see, this input here is escape. So if you were using a keyboard and you removed that, then you would no longer have a back option, an option to go back. So I don't recommend removing any of the keyboard inputs. I would just leave those there, but all of your joy inputs you're gonna want to remove. And then, because your joy input may not be the same as my joy input, and what I mean by that is X on my arcade controller may be Y on your Xbox or PlayStation controller, or whatever it is that you're using, or arcade controller. You may not have the buttons put in the same slots as mine. So you're just going to go to remove input, and then go to add input, and set it for, press whatever button you want to add it for. So when this pops up, this will overwrite an existing mapping. Add, remove favorites. Now, I accidentally hit the wrong button. That's why it's showing you this. But at the same time, you're probably going to get prompted with this message. Just go ahead and hit yes, and it will switch the input. Now, that input that you just added should be exactly what button you added it to. And you're going to want to do that for all of your secondary inputs. Now I'm going to roll down the list and show you what I have set for mine. Also, inside of the attract mode image itself, the folder should also have a separate folder with the front end, with my front end controller inputs, how I have all of my inputs set up. I have left photos of how I've configured a PlayStation controller, how I've configured an Xbox controller for the front end, and how I've got my arcade controller configured for the front end. So you can use those. I provided those as examples of how I have mine set up, and one of the reasons why I'm even showing you guys this again, to remove any inputs that may be pointless or you may not want as inputs, but go all the way down to custom buttons 1, 4, and 5. So I have 3 custom buttons set up. Custom button 1 is your keyboard search. Now that does not mean that you need a keyboard to use it. It works with your controller, and works with your arcade. It works with keyboard controllers, all alike. And then customs 4 and customs 5, I will show you how those work. In every arcade section on this image, you have the ability to switch through the music tracks. Now, in every one of the arcade sections, there is a total of 215 or 220 music tracks, but custom 4 and custom 5 will let you switch the track back, switch the track forward. So you got rewind, next track, previous track, pretty much. Okay. So yes, you can switch through all the audio in the arcade sections themselves. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. I got layout options, is if you want to change if you want to change the way the background interacts, how many wheel logos are present. That will be for another tutorial video. Again, I will be shooting several tutorial videos because there is so many different things that you can do with this front end versus Emulation Station that I feel I'm going to need to make them just so you guys have a general idea of how to work all the different functions. But yeah, so that's pretty much it. I mean, I'm going to show you how customs 1, 4, and 5 work, but everything else is pretty self-explanatory. You got screensaver, so that whatever you have that set to will launch your screensaver. Add remove favorites. Actually, I need to reset that. Add input. Yes, I want to override because I accidentally set it as my mute button. Configuration. Now, this is what I mean by dual input. My niece loves to play my arcade. So the last thing I want her to do is to be able to get into the configuration menu. So what I have is set a double press button to get into my configuration menu on my end. So basically I have my down and start button set. So in order to get into my configuration menu, you have to hold down the start button and press down on your D-pad. Okay, so that is also something you can do, and you can do that for every input. You can have dual buttons set up. I actually might do a tutorial on that if you guys want to see how exactly the dual button input works and the extent of it. But if you do, drop a comment down and I'll do another tutorial video. Alright, so but I mean, that's pretty much everything else is pretty much basic. Where is my add remove favorites? Mute. I gotta reset mute. What is my, okay, yeah. Okay, there we go. Now my mute button's back. But yes, as you can see, they're pretty much basic. Add remove favorites, mute. Display menu, actually going to show you how this button here works so you understand what display menu means. Alright, so actually back on out and I'll show you how that works now. Because there are endless amounts of different sections in attract mode, you may get lost in the endless different sections and just want to get back to your main menu, which is this menu right here. Alright, so for example, let's jump into collections. Jump into Bubble Bobble. Alright, now if you use this if you set your display menu button, then it does not matter where you are at in the front end. If you hit that button, it will always bring you back to the main menu. Alright, Alright, so that's how that button works. Now I'm going to show you how the keyboard search button works. And I recommend, if you're going to use it, to go to the all games section, because the way the keyboard search works is it will only search the current section that you're in. So for example, if you're in Super Mario and you say, alright, I want to search for a specific Metroid game, and you start searching for it, you're not going to find it if you're in that section, because it will only search what's in the Super Mario section. So I think it best works if you're in the all games section, because if it's just, for example, a game you can't find and you're wondering if it's on here, then if you go to the all games section and use keyboard search, it will search through all of the games. Alright, so set your keyboard search button, and this is what you will get. So for example, let's search in Super Mario's, because we were just talking about it. Now if you look, it went from 12,000 games to 83 games down in the corner, because it's all Super Mario. You go to Done, and boom, all Super Mario games. And you don't have to search for just like Super Mario either. So let's pull it back up. You go to delete. Let's see. Racing. Now anything that's categorized as racing, you now are looking at. And then to get it back to all games, you either back out of the all games section and then go back in, and it will reset it back to all games, or you just go and you go delete. And now we're back to 12,359 games. Then just go done, and there you go. That's how your keyboard search function works. Alright. Now I'm gonna quickly, so I don't get popped for a copyright strike, show you how your custom buttons 4 and 5 work. As you can see right now, I have it all muted. Alright, so what I mean by arcade sections, oops, wrong one, back to the top, arcades, you got Daphne, your Capcoms, Thomas Wave. Every one of these sections, you have the ability to switch through the audio tracks. Again, there's about 220. Alright, so we jump into Atari, and it will tell you what song is playing up at the top, and it will tell you that every time you switch the track, and then it will, after a few seconds, there you go, it'll go away. Alright, so next, and then you can go back, switch the track back. Okay, and that ends buttons customs 4 and 5. Alrighty guys, that's pretty much it as far as getting started. I just really wanted to go over what you would expect to see on first boot, and just kind of give you a rundown on the front end controls. And as you could see, there are a ton of different controller inputs that you can set, remove, change, however you want to do it. But again, don't forget that there is a folder within the download of the image with photographs that I have provided on how I have mine set up just to use for examples. and it's against, there's one for a PlayStation 4 controller, or a PS4 controller, a Xbox 360 controller, and an arcade controller. Alright guys, and as you can see, if you want to know how to shut down the system, you just find shutdown on the main wheel, and then you have shutdown and reboot. Now, also too, just so you know, once you have booted into attract mode, you do not have to worry about shutting it down and having to switch to attract mode every single time. Once you've booted into attract mode, shut it down, reboot it, turn it back on, you will always boot into attract mode unless you go to either extras or the attract mode settings section and use the front end selector to switch front ends. Alright guys, well, I hope this was helpful. I hope you're enjoying my image if you have downloaded it. If you have any questions, comments, any other tutorial videos, again, I'll be making a ton, but if there's a specific thing that you want to know how to work or want to know if it can do, just let me know and I will shoot a tutorial of it. Alright guys, gals, until the next one, game on!